So we'll talk about some of these signs and symptoms of what we call karahiyatul qadr, disliking the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the decree of Allah azza wa jal. By the way, this, a few things are true at the same time. Okay, so we believe in something called the included middle, right? So that you have the idea of the binary, the 0 and the 1. Then there is that which is in the middle, right? So that which is like a gray space, okay? So the gray area here is that, yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed all things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed everything from the beginning of time until the end. At the same time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you an free will to choose with our lives to do what we want to do, how we want to do it. Both of those are true. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has foreknowledge of all things. He knows what you're going to choose, when and why, and how you're going to choose it. He knows all of these things, subhanahu wa ta'ala. But at the same time, you and I have the free will to choose that thing as well. How is that true? It simply is. That's it. It simply is. And we are trying to understand a concept that is beyond, our very, very limited understanding, beyond space-time, beyond the few dimensions that we inhabit and we operate within. Beyond all of these things, we cannot grasp and comprehend these things. It's like trying to explain to a little ant how a space shuttle and a space rocket works. How are you going to explain that to an ant that is crawling there? Let me explain to you combustion. Let me explain to you how you can actually penetrate, the stratosphere and go into the heavens. You can't explain that to an ant. So that's you and I trying to understand it. We can't comprehend these things. It's beyond that, our knowledge. And there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that al-qadr sirrullah, the divine decree is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's secret. And no one and nothing can unveil that secret of Allah. They can't understand it. They can't grasp it or comprehend it. No angel and no prophet. So what about you and I? Lay people, regular people like us. We can't. But we simply accept it. And rather than sitting there and delving into, the debates of the philosophical underpinnings and understandings, a person simply accepts it for what it is. And they make the most of what they have. Right? I was speaking to a brother, earlier today. He's agnostic. He's interested in Islam. He wanted to learn. So I began to ask him questions. And I said, okay, so what do you believe about God? What do you believe about, how He got here, this and that? He's like, I've always been agnostic my whole life. I've always been agnostic my whole life. So I said, okay, so that means that you don't, take any position. You don't take a position that, yes, I believe in God. No, I don't believe in God. He's like, yeah. I said, why not? He's like, well, for me, I always need proof and there's no proof. I said, you are the proof. He's like, yeah, but there's no proof. I said, no, you're not understanding what I'm saying. I said, you physically are the living proof that God exists. I said, what about everything out here? How did all of this come here? I just took it as random. I said, what does that mean, random? I don't know, I just took it as random. And I'm sitting there and it's a young man, he's an intelligent guy, right? I asked him about his, academic career and he's a very, sharp person. But he's 23 years old and he has never seriously, critically thought about it. Never. How am I here and why am I here? Never thought about these things. And he said, I just thought it was random. And he basically just wrote it off. He wrote off his entire existence, that of his family, his friends, his whole purpose in life. He wrote all of it off as pure randomness, pure happenstance. It just is. So then when I started to ask him questions, and he was just kind of flustered. He said, yeah, I never thought about it. I said, what questions do you have about Islam? I don't really have any questions. So then I started teaching about Islam, and then the questions started coming. After I started telling him, okay, we believe this, then he started asking these kinds of questions. Then I began to ask him questions as well, things about infinite regress and all these kinds of logical arguments and whatnot, to try to get to the core of the matter there. And what you realize, what you see is most people are walking through life completely oblivious to the fact that they are playing a part, playing a role, and they don't realize that they're a part of a grand plan, that there is a meta-narrative. So each and every one of us has a narrative in our life. You have a narrative in your life. At the beginning, you were just, a son, a brother. That's it. Then you became a student. Then you became an employee. Then you became a husband. Then you became a father. And then you became, so now you're playing multiple narratives. There are multiple, timelines that are, happening for you at the same time. At one moment, you're this and this and this and this and this. So you're all of these things at the same time. Right? You went from being just one regular little thing to 2, to 3, to 4, to 5, to 7 different things at the same time. So that's your narrative as an individual. But beyond that, if you zoom out, each and every one of us plays a role in the greater meta-narrative, which is the role of all of humanity, all of the world. We play a very integral role in that. All of us.